with that, please welcome the big friendly giant of product management. Please welcome Martin Eriksson.
Well, what an intro. Thank you so much, Arne. I'm here to talk today about decisions. If I press the right direction. As product people, we make decisions every single day. In fact, we make so many decisions, they quickly become overwhelming. I was reminded of this just last week when Petra tweeted this about the thousands of decisions that Arne and Petra have had to make to deliver this conference and bring us together today. And it reminded me of just how many times I've come home, either from work or from organizing our conferences, and been so exhausted and so overwhelmed about making decisions that I can't even decide what I want for dinner. And as you can tell, I kind of like my dinners. I didn't think we were alone, so I put out a Twitter poll this week as well to see what you guys think. And we saw that over 74% of you feel overwhelmed by these decisions, at least weekly. So why are these decisions so hard? I want to step back a little bit and look at the psychology behind it and talk about something called the paradox of choice. Imagine you're going into a supermarket and you're just thinking, I'm thirsty, I want something to drink. The choices are overwhelming. Do you want water? Do you want juices? Do you want sodas? Do you want coffee? Do you want milk? Do you want juice water? Do you want vitamin water? A million different brands, even once you choose one thing that you want. There's a bunch of research around this, and Barry Schwartz, who's a psychologist and wrote a book called The Paradox of Choice over 15 years ago, looked at all this research and realized that the more options we add actually cause psychological trade-offs. And that psychological cost has very real consequences. So the greater the variety, the greater the number of choices, the worse we actually feel. Of course, economists tell us that zero choice is the fastest route to low quality. And I think we've all seen that in markets where there's no competition or there's a monopoly and quality goes down, customer experience is terrible. So of course there's a middle ground somewhere. And Sheena Iyengar, who's a professor at Columbia, a sociologist, psychologist, and actually did the original research that Barry based his book off, has continued to do this research over the last 10, 20 years. And what they're finding in all of this research is that there has to be that middle ground. When you're given a moderate number of options instead of a large number, first of all, you're more likely to actually make a choice, you're more confident in that decision, and you're happier with that decision. So going back to the supermarket analogy, if instead of just walking in and thinking, I'm thirsty, you go in thinking, oh, I want a pick-me-up, I want something with caffeine. Or even, I want a pick-me-up with caffeine and no sugar. Suddenly, your choices get narrower, and it's easier to make that decision. You're much more likely to go, oh yeah, I want a Red Bull, good, and leave the store. So what does this mean for product decisions? Well, first of all, don't offer too many choices in your product. But a lot of people have written a lot better about that and speak a lot better about that than I will, so that's a talk for another time. Second of all, you have to rethink how you make decisions about your product. Because I believe that there's something called the paradox of autonomy that makes those product decisions so hard. Now, hopefully, most of you have read my book or read my blog posts or seen me speak about autonomy and know that I'm a huge believer in empowered teams and the importance of delegating that responsibility and those decisions to the people who are closest to the customer and closest to the information. As Steve Jobs said, it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. But unfettered autonomy can lead to chaos. Everyone's running in different directions. Everyone's trying to do different things. Imagine you're this guy in the bottom right corner just going, read my story, I want to build this. As Jeff Bezos says, success comes from aligning around those high quality and high velocity decisions. So in the hypothetical store of a product manager, you have a lot of choices. You can go in a million different directions. You can do the product in any way you want. Where do you want to go? And that's why these decisions become overwhelming. And the key to solving that is simply about aligning on a direction. It doesn't mean taking away autonomy. It doesn't mean command and control. It just means let's all point in this direction. And then within that, we still have that freedom and autonomy to figure out what we need to do. So alignment means less decision overload. It means better decisions and happier teams. So how do we actually create that alignment? Well, this is where that decision stack comes in, and it all starts with your vision. I think a lot of companies are actually very good at doing this. They set out that kind of end state, the 30-year view, the generational view of where they want to go. Then you need a strategy to figure out how you're actually going to achieve that. You might use objectives, opportunities to figure out what you're actually going to build down to the day-to-day work, and then underpin it all with principles. As Arne said in the intro, the beauty of this is as you start making these decisions and clarifying each step of the decision stack, you're also saying no. Down. And as you're saying no, it's just as important as what you're saying yes to. Clarifying what you're not going to do is just as important as saying what you are going to do. The other beauty of the decision stack is that it helps you ask the right questions. So from the top down, you're simply asking how. How are we going to achieve this vision? Well, here's our strategy. How are we going to achieve that? Here's our objectives, and so on. But it also helps everyone in your teams, or if you're an individual product manager, understand how your work connects up by simply asking why. Why are we doing this opportunity? Well, we think it's going to help with these objectives. Why are we doing that? Well, we think it's going to achieve this strategy, and so on. The other part of this is that it really highlights that when something is missing in the stack, that chain breaks. And we don't know why we're doing this work. We don't know how it connects to the company goals. And everything kind of comes tumbling down. Now, I've been a product leader for 25 years. I interviewed hundreds of people for our book. And I'm now a partner at a VC firm where I help nearly 100 portfolio companies with these challenges. And the two things I see missing in almost every one of those conversations are a clear strategy and clear principles. Now, strategy kind of befuddles me, right? Because it's not a new thing. There's not a new concept. We talk about strategy a lot. Anyone who's been to business school talks about it all the time. There are nearly 100 different strategy frameworks that you can pick from, and this list is 10 years old. My favorite is an ancient one. I learned it in business school called SWOT analysis. It's 1969. Why are we still talking about this? I don't know. If you haven't heard of SWOT before, it's a very simple thing to think about. What are your internal strengths and weaknesses, and then what are your external opportunities and threats, and decide on a strategy based on that. So your strengths might include your capabilities, your technology, your insights, your unique distribution channel. Your weaknesses include things like capacity. You might not have enough people. You might not have our skills. You might have tech debt in your tech stack. Opportunities might include, new markets opening up, trends shifting. If you were in mobile e-commerce 15 years ago, you were following the right trend and suddenly started beating everyone who just focused on desktop, right? Threats might include the same, right? If you were the desktop guy, you were being threatened by the people who started doing mobile. But the bottom line is we have to also make this actionable. It's not enough to set out this nice grid of SWOT analysis and then kind of put it on the shelf and start moving on. And this is where your product super skills come in, right? Because Marty Kagan's talked about this. We all know how to work around valuable, usable, viable, and feasible business risks and actually make those strategy pieces actionable. As an example, my last job before I went to the dark side and became a VC was as an interim chief product officer at Kazoo. They set out a strategy very early on and kind of went through all these steps and realized that there's the UK used car market is a huge market. It's a multi-billion pound market. It's incredibly highly fragmented. The largest single player has a 2% market share. And therefore, there's a giant long tail of small businesses, corner stores with 2 or 3 cars on the lot, and therefore famously a terrible customer experience. So the opportunities are that there's this huge market that's barely been penetrated by e-commerce, but another opportunity is actually that it would take significant capital to succeed in. Threats included looking at US companies who are already doing this that might want to expand. Those UK offline businesses, even a 2% market share was an 8 or 10 billion pound business. Like, they could quite easily want to start investing in this. And so the strategy became, yes, we have to build a great e-commerce experience, but that's kind of a solved problem. That's not rocket science. We have to build exceptional operational capabilities so that we can deliver a car anywhere in the UK within 48 hours of purchase. And finally, we actually have to raise enough money to build a big business. We have to go buy 3,000 cars. That takes a lot of capital. And there's not a lot of people who can do that. And so the founder, Alex Chesterman, did that, executed on that strategy. I was the 5th person in the door as the interim CPO. Within 2 years, they had 450 people on the product and engineering team. They had SPAC'd for $8 billion last year. And of course, the current market condition has probably halved that, but that's still a significant business built in just 2 years. At the end of the day, strategy is really, really hard, but it's also everybody's responsibility. So I encourage you, even if you're an individual contributor, product manager, to go out there and learn about how to do it well, and bring that back to your company. The other thing that I see missing in so many companies is principles. And this one, to me, is almost even more pernicious. And it's something that we can all immediately and directly influence. As Roy Disney said, and he was the nephew of Walt Disney, he's a senior executive at the Disney Corporation, and credited with saving Disney many, many times over his career, said, "It's not hard to make decisions when you know what your principles are." Now, I was lucky enough to learn this lesson early on in my career when I worked at Monster as a product manager in 1999. And can we just marvel at what the internet looked like in 1999? That's a work of art right there. And of course, Monster is a job board. They're still around, I think. And as a job board, it's a two-sided marketplace. So you have job seekers on the one side looking for jobs, and you have recruiters on the other side looking to hire those people. The recruiters pay for that service, and the job seekers get it for free. And in almost every product conversation that we had when I started, we had to talk about that tension. Because you can imagine every single feature that you build could be built in a job seeker-friendly way, or it could be built in a recruiter-friendly way. And which one do you want to do? And so we would go through long debates about the pros and cons. We would prototype stuff. We would test things. What's the right way to do this? Just waste a lot of mental energy, to be honest. Until a few months into the role, about 6 months in, I was in the US headquarters just outside Boston, and we were having the same debate again, and I kind of saw the CEO walking past, and I just pulled him into the meeting room. It's like, help us make this decision. And he listened for a few minutes, and then he said, hang on. Job seekers always come first. If we build an amazing experience for them, the recruiters will have to follow, because they want access to that pool. And so that became a very simple mantra for us to understand every time we faced that decision. We didn't even have to get into the debate. We didn't have to get into the argument. We literally just said, yep, job seeker first, move on. So those past decisions help provide focus for your future decisions. And those decisions are your product principles. And that means that product principles are not just values. How many of you have one or more of these as a company value, a team value, up on a wall, maybe in your office before the pandemic? Can I see a show of hands? Has something like this in your company values? I think at least half of you raise your hand. I think the other half realize I'm about to call you out, so you didn't. There's nothing wrong with these. These are all admirable goals. And I am going to call out Marty Kagan on that last one, because he just wrote a post about excellence last week as a principle. There's nothing wrong with these. They are admirable. But are they helping you make a decision? Does anybody in this room want to build a terrible user experience? do you want mediocrity? Did you ever go into a product decision and go, no, we need to build this really, really crappily? Oh, thank God we have that principle. We should really actually kind of build a nice experience. So they are good things that we want to do these things, of course, but they're not helping you make those decisions. And Miria and the Zing team shared this research that they've done recently into company values across the industry. And sadly, almost all of them are just this fluffy. Product principles have to be a framework for decision making. And so there's a couple of rules to think about. Number one, you have to be specific about your trade-offs. So in the Monster example, for example, you might say job seeker, even over recruiter. Or you might care about conversion, even over revenue. You might care about the mobile experience, even over desktop. Using even over statements really helps you call out your strategic trade-offs. And you might recognize these from the Agile Manifesto. And just like in the Agile Manifesto, we're not saying that the things on the right are not important. We're just saying that in any trade-off conversation, the things on the left are more important. So some examples from other companies include Google, focus on the user, and all else will follow, just like the Monster one. Shopify actually flips it on its head and says, put merchants first, because they believe that by building the best possible experience for their e-commerce merchants, the consumers will follow. Klarna gets really specific and says conversion trumps profitability optimization. So they want everyone to focus on converting customers, getting the customer, even if that means not eking out every cent of profitability. And Supercell, the gaming company, focus on long-term retention over short-term retention. Again, they're a gaming company. Of course they're going to care about short-term retention. Gaming companies live and die by day one retention. But they also want all their product people to focus on long-term retention and engagement and making it a fun environment and not just a kind of sticky game. The second thing to think about is that principles have to align with your decision stack. As we saw earlier, if you take out any of these pieces, it's all going to come falling down. And the principles really help every team make those decisions about how they're going to build what they're going to build. It also means that everything that you said no to when developing your decision stack is probably a principle. And number three, I called out values, but principles can actually help make them actionable. So instead of saying build a delightful user experience, you might do what Pinterest does and say make it intuitive, not learned. Focusing everyone's mind on how do you make this an intuitive experience and not rely on the crutch of documentation or onboarding tools. Co-op have We Design for Everyone. Again, just emphasizing that they want everyone to focus on accessibility and usability. Or Google has fast is better than slow. These are all helping you figure out what they prioritize. You might not agree with them, but that company focuses on that. So good product principles describe how you want to build your product and the trade-offs that you're willing to make. They're specific to your company, strategy, and vision. They're actionable, memorable, and simple. And at the end of the day, they simply help make your decisions easy. Bad product principles are that meaningless fluff for kind of only focusing on your values. At the end of the day, everybody wants to make their experience delightful, so it's not helping you make decisions, and it's not helping you differentiate yourself from your competition. Now, we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? Design has design systems. They don't debate the color of the button every time they add a button. Engineering has coding principles that talk about their definition of done and what they're focused on. Product needs product principles just as much so that we can make those decisions faster. Now, I've been helping, like I said, our portfolio with a lot of these challenges, and I wanted to pick out some examples to share with you to maybe just underline how this can work. So Code Sandbox is kind of a next-generation developer environment, all in the cloud, collaborative, instead of your kind of solo sandbox at home. And they have principles that focus on teams over individuals, because again, based on their strategy, they decide that teams are more important than individuals, that team collaboration is where they can stand out. They focus on integration over composability and sensible defaults over configuration, which is kind of a two-for-one because it's helping them make decisions, but it's also minimizing the decisions their users have to make. Another example is KiteMaker, building the kind of next generation of issue tracking, focused on bringing together product design and engineering in one place. So their principles include collaboration over documentation, because they want everyone to focus on bringing those teams together in one place and not just being a ticket writing tool where one team writes a ticket and throws it over the wall to the other team. They also focus on meeting their users where they work, so integrating into existing workflows like Slack and GitHub instead of trying to replicate those. And fundamentally, they're calling out to themselves, we are not an issue tracker. We don't want to be a slightly better Jira. They want to be something different, and it forces them to think about those product decisions every single time. A final example is Vev, which is, again, kind of next-generation web building software, bringing together designers and developers in a low-code, no-code manner. And they have principles that include activating teams over individuals. Again, all about that collaboration. They were focused on product engagement over revenue optimization. And then predictably, the market shifted, and they had to flip them around. So now their principles help them make decisions that focus on ARR growth, because that's what the market's asking them for now. And interestingly, the team one hasn't really changed, because that's still how they drive that average customer value. So product principles help make decisions. But how do we actually get started? Well, there's a couple of easy tools. From the bottom up, use your retrospectives. When you're bringing the whole team together to talk about what worked and what didn't work, take note of the things, the arguments, the discussions that you keep having, and codify them. And there's nothing wrong with having those discussions. They're amazing things to have. But the idea is you want to have it once, and then write it down so that you don't have to have it again. What have you said no to in this sprint? What have you said no to on the roadmap? Those are probably outlines of a principle. From the top down, if you're in leadership or you can influence your leadership, make sure that they're reinforcing their strategy by articulating those trade-offs. What's really going to make you successful and what's not? So that's the decision stack, and the point here is that this is your responsibility, whether you're a product leader or a junior product manager or anything in between. So keep asking questions until your decision stack is clear. Keep asking how are we going to achieve that vision, how are we going to achieve that strategy, or from the bottom up, why are we doing this work? It doesn't align with the goals. Why are we doing this work? It doesn't align with our objectives. Make sure that strategy and principle are synchronized, because they're kind of the sandwich that sandwiches all the real work, if we're honest. And if you get those wrong, then you're going to be going in the wrong direction or overloading yourself with decisions. And as we saw, they change at different cadences, right? So your vision is probably fairly static. It might not be something that you even achieve in your lifetime. It should be really aspirational. Your strategy is probably the next 2-3 years, or if you're in a VC-funded company, it's until your next round. Your principles evolve slowly, but obviously react to any strategy changes, as we saw. And everything else is in constant flux as we're doing discovery, as we're figuring out what's working, what's not working, and moving the product forward. To close out, I wanted to quote one of my favorite business authors, Peter Drucker, who's written an insane 39 books on leadership. Whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision. So make better decisions faster using the decision stack, because it actually helps make room for those courageous decisions. Thank you.